Welcome, everybody. My name's Gary Fortney, and this is The Trend. As all of you know, The Trend podcast talks about true crime, law enforcement-related issues, the law enforcement profession, and the regional issues that go around with our community, including the St. Louis region, the state of Missouri, and the nation. And we cover topics that are of interest to the public regarding all of those different areas. And we're going to change things up a little bit here. We're still going to talk about crime, and part of it is kind of semi-true crime. We have a local author in from the St. Louis area who has written a number of books regarding mysteries, true crime, and other things that go on regarding the thought processes of somebody who is a writer and putting in words. So we have two guests today. The first is Tony Piwowarcyzk. Tony works for Trend as a research specialist, and Tony is retired Bureau Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Special Agent, Senior Special Agent. And Tony's been with Vista Law Enforcement Training for quite a few years, and now he works for the Trend podcast doing research. And then we have Jim Miller. Jim Miller is a local author in the St. Louis area. Jim has been an author for a number of years. We're going to get into that deep. And Jim's going to share some things about being a local author in crime-related thrillers that may be of interest to the public. We're hoping some of you read his books. They're very well written. And he used some real characters in real life, which is very interesting. Don't be surprised if one of his books isn't going to talk about a podcast where somebody ends up murdered, dead, or otherwise. So anyways,
it's entirely possible.
It takes a lot of things. So anyways, let me talk a little bit about how I met Jim Miller originally. As our previous episode, we're filming at beautiful Old Hickory Golf Club in St. Peters, Missouri. Tony and I play a lot of golf here. We kind of take advantage of the full parts of the golf club. And I met Jim Miller, I would say at least, 5-6 years ago?
It's at least that's probably 7.
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah, 7 or 8, actually.
Jim is also a member of Old Hickory. I met Jim on the golf course, and then I've also met Jim in the clubhouse where we sit around and have dinner, lunch, or a few drinks. And Jim is a very interesting career, what he did, what he does, and what he's doing now. So, even though I've known Jim for a while, I'm going to let Tony take more of the podcast and questioning of Jim regarding some of the books he's written and the number of books, the character development, and so on. So, anyways, Tony, why don't you start a little bit with go through Jim's background to get everybody familiar with a little bit.
Well, we were discussing before the podcast started the number of books that Jim has written, and the correct number is 42, and they cover a wide range of topics, as Gary said. But Jim is from St. Louis, born, raised, and still lives here. And I thought we might talk a little bit about just growing up here, and then he is a military veteran of the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. Thank him for his service, and how he incorporated some of his early life into his books.
That's right. It means I'm old, by the way. I'm a St. Louis kid, South St. Louis, born and raised. My wife and I moved out here to St. Charles about 7 years ago. You know, I'm a recovering Catholic. I hope that doesn't bother people. I went to Catholic school when I was a kid, went to public high school. I went in the Army right after high school, spent 3 years in the service, spent a year in Vietnam, and that's what I did until I got back from overseas. And then I got married and started having kids and went to nursing school. And it's easy to tell you which nursing schools I didn't go to rather than the ones that I did, because I went to a bunch of them. And then I was a nurse for 35 years. I did, you name it, I did it. I ran the cardiology department at St. Mary's Hospital. I did transplants and all kinds of other junk. I was in the cancer business and bone marrow and burn units and ICUs. Again, it's easy to tell you what I didn't do rather than tell you all the things I did do. And then I taught my last 5 years, retired. It'll be 15 years ago this July the 1st. And then after that, it's been playing golf, playing poker, doing pretty much what I want. And then it was in November of 2012. I'd been retired for a couple of years, and I was as much of a bum as I could pull off.
You deserved it. You deserved it.
I did. I deserved it. I really did. Whatever my wife would allow me not to do, I wouldn't. And I was reading a book downstairs one day, and we're talking about writing now. And I had been writing all my life. So I'd scribble in something, little kids' books. I won a contest for a local newspaper for a Halloween contest. The crazy part was that the prize was you got to be a writer. And I covered high school sports for St. Charles County, which was a lot of fun. But then, like I said, this one morning in November, having had 2 books years and years before that made all of the, the rounds of agents and publishing houses and so forth and so on. Without any luck, by the way. I could paper a bedroom with all the rejection slips.
Definitely a tough business back then.
Well, it's even tougher now because back then you had to have an agent. I think you still do, because you couldn't really do what they used to call put a book in over the transom to a publisher. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I can get into all that stuff if you want me to now, or we can talk about other stuff. It's up to you. But I mean, it's a very difficult business. And I'll just give you a statistic when it makes it two, actually. One is that, publishing is actually condensed in on itself because, there are so many fewer, if that's kind of contradictory, there are fewer publishing houses than there were 35 years ago or 40 years ago when I first started writing.
Why is that, Jim?
Well, economics mostly. I mean, mostly, what, like Penguin was bought out by Random House, and there was a lot of what they called small press publishers back then. So the opportunity actually to actually get a book published in the conventional style was a little easier back then, but still there's economics involved, and you have to understand is that if a publishing house has like John Grisham and well, just name Michael Conley, those kinds of guys, all right? And these guys usually they write a book a year, and they do pre-publishing and pre-promotions and stuff like that. So the publishing houses have stable of people whose books sell, okay, that they market, and they've made money on these people's books. Not always, but like people like Grisham and some other guys who've sold a lot of books, made movies and so forth. And so it makes it very difficult for someone who is brand new to actually crash into the publishing business because of that simple thing. Is it for a publishing house to make the bet on someone who doesn't have a track record, okay, who hasn't sold any books in a standard sense? That's a big expense. I mean, if they're going to do like a 10,000 book run, that's a lot of money. Okay, and then you have to go out and you have to publicize it, and you have to go do book signings, and there's all sorts of things you have to do, and I've done some of that. But the point is that they're betting that their stable of people who are already selling their books are going to keep them in business, whereas if they take a flyer on someone like me, then they're taking a chance that, people are going to go, well, yeah, this is a nice doorstop, but I wouldn't want to read it. The guy needs to not lose his day job. So it makes it hard, especially for new authors. It makes it very, very difficult to be published in the traditional style. One other thing before I get into the other stuff is that in 2012, which is the last time I checked, Amazon loaded 400,000 new titles in the fiscal year of 2012. 400,000 new titles. So the probability of your book being a standout with other, because a lot of people out there that can write. I mean, they really can. People can really write good stories. But it's really difficult for that person to get some traction simply because you're competing against 500,000 other people. So anyway, I'm not going to get into the politics of it because that's boring. But anyway, that's how I got started. Back to where I started before. That it was a Thursday morning in November. It was gray outside, and I just had this thought. Don't ask me where it came from. Just had this thought, and it was a cold November day, and it was too cold to do something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but not warm enough to snow. And this is just this goofy thought in my head was just there, and I'm laying there thinking about that, and I thought, damn, that's a pretty nice idea. I really liked it. I think I'm gonna go write that down. So I did. And the next thing I knew, I had a third novel. I mean, the other two were in a box someplace, and I've just given up on them. But I mean, I had a new novel. It's called, there's a lot of them. It's Fading Light is the name of the first book, okay? And I had this idea with that line. I thought, man, what a great line that was. I got to write that down, and I did. So I started writing this book, and the book is about people who can disappear. And there's a military aspect of it and so forth and so on. But the funny part about it is that line that got me started writing that book, which is my first published book, didn't make the cut. You can read the book. You read the book as many times as you want to. You're never going to find that line in there. And to be perfectly honest with you, other than the first time I wrote it down, I'm not certain that it ever did. That got that started. And I wrote that book, and then I started I'm a big Civil War aficionado. Civil War. Thank you. And I wrote another book about the Civil War in Missouri, being a Missourian.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Everything I write is fiction.
That's what I was going to bring up.
No, well, I mean, the thing is, this is actually historical fiction, Gary.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's a lot. I did a lot of research. I mean, most of the stuff is true, but I fictionalized it. Okay. I mean, about the Pea Ridge and all the other battles in in Missouri that actually took place long before Manassas.
Based in fact.
Absolutely. It's all based in fact.
Fictional story behind it and fictional characters.
Yeah. Well, no, not all the characters are fictional.
I wouldn't call Tony fictional because you're in a couple of his books.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not fictional. You're real life.
Not in Civil War, though.
Yeah.
He's a real guy.
I wasn't around then.
Who knows?
But then I had a very, very good friend. I was, like I said, I was a registered nurse. I was working in the cancer business down at Washington University. This young lady who was a nurse, good friend of mine, I took care of her and helped her when she was trying to die one day. And between the two of us, we decided that wasn't a good idea. And then she started working with me at the cancer center. And then one day I got a phone call that she'd been murdered. Okay? Some kids broke into her house. She lived in those apartments where they're just kind of against the, I forget exactly what street that is, but there's kind of like a mall there. And on the other side is Ralston Purina. Okay? She lived in there. She was actually tutoring this young cop, okay, who was going to take the paramedic course. And they were leaving the house after this session and stuff. And these three kids who were hopped up on something, they decided that they were going to go in the house and they were going to steal things. Nobody really knows what happened at that point. This kid was carrying this old hoopty 38 that was probably rusted, and who knew if it was ever going to fire. And nobody knows what had happened. But what did happen was somebody started shooting. They don't know if it was the young lady cop or if it was this kid who just panicked and started shooting. Bullets started to fly. Jeannie got hit in the head, and she died. That was a tragedy for me. And her son, Sam, who was, I think, 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old then, he was there. He was in the house. And he came into the living room when he heard the news and saw his mom get killed. So that's what started the Sam Nerviani movies, novels.
Right. And prior to that, you had just a little experience with your son, Zach, who wanted to write a book with you, which was, I find the funny part that precedes this tragic event.
Well, yeah. See, the thing was, is like I said, in the first two of the books, I was doing traditional stuff. And I was, you print your book up and you get a chapter and you write a synopsis and a cover letter and it's called a query letter. Okay. And you send it off to an agent and they read it and stuff and like that. So there was this, I had been doing that for quite a while for this first book that was called A Series of Doubts. It was a baseball mystery. Don't ask me. I don't know. There was this guy, his name was Evan. I can't remember his last name. But anyway, he was an agent in Denver, Colorado. And I had sent a book to him and he had read it and he liked it, but he couldn't sell it. And, it was one of those too bad, so sad kind of deals. So my son came home and I think Zach was about 8 years old at the time and maybe 7. And he'd always been bugging me about, come on, Dad, let's write a book together. Let's write a book together. And I'd always tell him, I said, sure. I said, you come up with an idea of what you want to write about and we'll do it. No big deal. He comes home from school one day and he says, Dad, we got it. I've got the idea. And he said, they were studying the Titanic, okay? The sinking of the Titanic. And he says, here's what I want to do, Dad. I want to write this book, but I want to write it from the point of view of the iceberg. And I went, oh, darn, that's a really good idea. And he said, even better, I know the iceberg's name. It was called Icky the Iceberg. And I said, boy, that's gold, bro. I said, but what you need to do, I said, I'm going to help you write it. I said, but what you need to do is you need to go and find the voice of this iceberg for me, okay? And he did. We wrote it. We sent it into the same guy that Evan, whatever his name was.
Fogelman.
Fogelman's his name, Evan Fogelman. Thank you.
That's what you're drinking a lot back then.
I was drinking a lot back then.
Well, him and Mr. Jameson were real tight.
Yeah, yes, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, the same guy who had just told me, too bad, so sad, right? Really likes your stuff, but I can't do anything with it. He sends back an acceptance letter for my little 8-year-old snotty little, that kid, they killed him. But what he said was, it was written, no,
he's going to let you know that, right?
Don't misunderstand me. I mean, I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, but he got the acceptance letter.
Yeah, he got the acceptance letter, and I just keep getting the rejection letters. But anyway, what Fogelman said was that it's a great story, and it will sell.
There's always a but.
But publishers won't publish single kid stories, okay? They won't do that. So we have to make it a series. I said, great. I said, we can do that. Came home again. They were studying Vesuvius, okay? The eruption of Vesuvius. So
that's a volcano.
Thank you so much.
I'll let you know, okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we did Vinny Vesuvius was the name of the next book. Wrote it. Fantastic. It really was really good. And because these were all his ideas. And then we were working on the third one, which was going to be gold. This one was going out. And it's going to be about a
The third in the series.
Third one of the series. This was going to be it. This was going to Denver, and it was going to. He had a publisher in mind. Everything was going to be great. My son was going to start making money, or whatever. And I don't remember if we had a title for it. Since written it myself.
Yeah, you finished it.
I finished it since as a short story. In one of my short story volumes. But anyway, we're in the middle of doing this, and what it was I don't know if you remember or have ever read the Red Badge of Courage, right? And so it was kind of a riff on the Red Badge of Courage, except it was taken from the point of view of a squirrel. He was 8 years old. Come on, and we get about halfway done with it. It's really going good, and he comes home one day, and his mother had gotten him a cartoon coloring drawing thing. Okay, he said, "Dad, I won't do this no more." He said, I'm gonna draw cartoons, and that's the end of it. And that story and that series sat for, 30 years?
Yeah.
35 years before I finally finished the book itself. So anyway, that was that.
Finished it on your own.
Yeah, I did. I finished it on my own, that little bugger.
Did it get published?
No. Well, yeah. I mean, the story is, I think it's in volume 2 of the short stories. I got 3 volumes of short stories. Okay. But anyway, that's why I started doing, and here's the other thing too. I just happen to have a number of cop friends, okay? My father was a policeman. And guys that I knew here when I was a member here, who I played golf with, who are all, they're all retired cops by now, but I know a lot of policemen. And then there was that very tragic story about Jeannie, my buddy. And so I wrote that first story. It's called The Nightingale Murders, and it's about Jean. It's actually, I really fictionalized a whole bunch of it, but it's done on the premise of that Jeannie was murdered. And that my son was there. Because then Sam Nerviani grows up, and he is now a homicide detective. And
that's the name, Sam Nerviani.
Sam Nerviani. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's
murder mystery.
That's Sam's name, Sam Nerviani. His mom,
Well, and he's a running character throughout that series.
Yes, he is.
Plus his brother Ben Stollis.
Ben Stollis is his brother. His mama, kind of. Jeannie, well, never mind.
But they are real people.
Whenever somebody says never mind, there's more meat to that.
Oh, there's actually, well, I've only got 40 minutes or so. But the deal of this is, that Jeannie was married to Stollis, who was a cop. And if this wasn't on, I'd tell you something about him, but I'm not going to. But then she married another guy. This guy was a card dealer for a casino or something like that. His name was Stollis. And whatever. Good old Jeannie. You got to love her. She's just the sweetest gal in the world. Everybody loved her. I tell you this story. When she died, when she was murdered, you know where the funeral home is on Gravois? Is it on Gravois?
Cootis,
yeah. And there's a church or a school right across the street. Well, anyway, the line for her viewing, okay?
There in South City.
Yeah, in South City, right. I'm pretty sure that's Gravois, isn't it? There was 4,000 people came to her wake. 4,000 people. I want you to take that number in. 4,000 people. And the day she was buried, she went it was at St. Raymond's. That was her parish. It's not a Catholic church. It's something like it. But anyway, it rained. It was cold. Okay, it was in October, and it was cold and it was raining, and people stood outside in the rain because the church was full. I'll tell you something about Jeannie. Okay.
What kind of person she was.
Oh, she was a fantastic person. She left the Barnyard Cancer Center and went down to the VA. And the guys down at the VA, I wrote a book about that too. The guys down at the VA just, they were convinced that the sun came up because Jeannie wanted it to. I mean, that's just the truth. So
Sam and Ben in modern day life
they're firemen. They're both
St. Louis City.
Yep, they just graduated from the academy. They're both firemen. I'm so proud of them. They turned out. It's been a tough life, as you can imagine, for both of those boys, but especially Sammy. But it's not the mistakes you make. It's what you do with yourself after. They're God bless them. I mean, they're first responders now and doing really, really great things. But that's what got that started. And that series was 7 books long, and I got tired of it. I told myself that I'm done with this. I don't want to write this murder stuff anymore because I was busy doing other things. I've got, like I said, 42 books altogether.
But that series goes on for 15 books.
Well, I was getting there, Tony.
Yeah, Tony.
At seven, I even wrote where they retired. You've got the book. I mean, I wrote it. But then I started having more ideas, And I realized that, because let me put it this way. There's this tenet. I mean, there's a couple of really good writers. What he did was the way he wrote his stories, and he wrote it over a period of over 20 years, is that he never let his Spencer is the guy's name. Spencer is a private detective in Boston. He used to be a cop. Okay? He never lets his character age. Never does. And the difference between him and, say, Michael Connelly, who wrote the Harry Bosch things, another great series of stuff. He let Harry age, okay? And that really kind of backs you into a box. Okay, it really does, because after a while, I mean, take the series The Big Bang. Okay, right? If you watch The Big Bang, it was on for 12 years, right? But if you look at it, I mean, they had done all the things. Friends was another thing like that. Cheers was another one like that. I mean, done all the things. Everybody got married, or they all had girlfriends. I mean, there was really there's no more stories that you could tell. And that happens when you let your characters age. And that's my opinion, of course. And since I'm doing the writing, that's what it is. So I don't let in that series, I just started having these ideas. And that's where this one, what is that one? What's that, Snitch? Well, that's Jimmy G. That's just a character. That's a guy we used to play cards with, so I wrote a story about him being a policeman. But there's a bunch of them called Perfect, which is called The Perfect Crime. And I love doing that because I actually stole the idea from a movie called 3 Days of the Condor. Great movie. And he stole it from a Dick Tracy thing. Dick Tracy was the world's best detective, by the way, in the comics, of course. There was this murder that they couldn't solve because the guy was shot in the chest, right? But there's no ballistics. There's no absolute. There's an entry hold and there's a couple of drops of water, and that's it. They can't find anything. There's no exit hole. There's they tore the guy apart, couldn't find it. Well, what it was that the guy.
Are you going to spoil it?
Yeah, you've read it.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, he molds, but it's not the well. No, all right, I won't tell you that. I won't tell you that. You can get the book and you can read it. You can kind
What's
of figure it out.
What's the name of the book again?
You can save the book.
What's the name of the book?
That one is perfect from the point of view of perfect crime, because it becomes almost insoluble, because there's no motive, and you'd have to conjure a motive. And that'll tell you something about writing murder mysteries. I was thinking about this on the way over here today, that murder mysteries are really easy. I was coming up the steps, as a matter of fact. They're really easy to write because the only thing that you have to determine is what happened. Okay?
Yeah, the physical death.
Yeah, you don't have to figure out how it happened or why it happened, who was mad, what did they use. You don't have to do that nonsense. You don't have to do it. All you have to do is come up with the idea, and then you fill in the blanks.
And it has changed by the time you get to the end of the book.
Absolutely is. I was telling Sarah about the book I just finished and sent off to the publisher. Is that many times, I'll start a story like the book I just sent to the publisher. The name of it is Sabelsky. Okay, the original title was Tall, because it's about a kid who grew to be over 7 feet tall, and he started growing when he was 7 years old. And it was a story about a kid trying to accommodate through a lifetime being a giant. And he didn't want to be a giant. He didn't want to play basketball. He didn't want to do those kinds of things. He was one of these kind of kids. He likes to look at the grass and wonder why this one is thick and that one is thin and this is green and that one's yellow. Why? Those are the things that interest the kid. He didn't want to play basketball. He did not. And he did not want to be tall. And that's what the story was about, right? The story, that sounds pretty cool. And then he meets a girl. He met Sabelsky. And that's how the name of the book went from Tall to Sabelsky, because he meets this girl. And it's a story about people. I even put it in the author's note. I swear to God I did. When it gets, I'll show it and you can read it. It says, the author's note says, I have no idea what this is about, and I have no idea why I wrote it. I said, if you read it, I hope you can call me and let me know, because like I was telling Sarah, is that I started writing it, and the next thing you know, the characters take over, and they always do that in that first book, in that first murder mystery, for instance. But there's a character that is in each and every one of the murder books, each and every one, and her name is
Maggie.
Yeah, Maggie Vinagoni. And where did Maggie Vinagoni come from? Vinagoni is a girl I dated when my best friend took her out, and she didn't want to go out with him anymore, but she would go out with me. Her name was Donna Vinagoni. She lived right across from Marquette Park. Those are nefarious things, but it's really true. But anyway, I'd never written a female character before, never had. And Sam's original partner gets killed. Okay. They go to just ask this guy some questions, and he lives up off of Skinker, okay? It's Skinker on the other side of the park. Yeah, okay, it's Skinker all the way down. Then 2-3 blocks up, where like the metro station is, that's County, right?
What are the genre of your books? And is there a breakup percentage, or what is your books?
Yeah, there are. I mean, like I said, if I've got 42, then I think there's 19. Did I tell you that? I mean, you can look in one of the books. I think it's 19. I think it's 19 murder mysteries. And and then there's 3 volumes of short stories, and I wrote a novella about the poker room in there.
The Ghost of the 19th Hole. Which actually came about during one of our poker games.
Because there was a ghost in there knocking stuff over. That's what happened. Scared the crap out of all of us.
We heard it from the kitchen. We heard some noise, and I was like, Is that the ghost of the 19th hole?
I said, there's a title right there, baby.
So, yeah, we have a poker room where we play cards, and we play poker every Thursday. This is a Thursday. We're playing poker tonight, actually, and a lot of good conversations. Jimmy's had some good ideas for things like Jimmy G. The book he wrote, Jimmy G. Jimmy G was a real person. Jimmy played at our poker games every Thursday. A great guy. Jimmy has since passed away.
And he was nicknamed by Gary as Geppetto,
Geppetto.
I had
the
a
puppet
vision.
master.
I had a vision one day sitting there. The vision said his name is Geppetto, and that lasted for him for years. Even his grandson called him Geppetto at the end. So, anyways, yeah, real character development. Well, 43 here. You're going to write 43rd, I'm sure. So you'll do that for sure.
Yeah, I'm playing soccer with a bunch of old Italians over in Chesterfield now. I'm too old to do that, but I'm doing it anyway.
But you're not too old to get involved in a little scuffle.
Well, I'm a South St. Louis kid, and if you throw elbows,
Is that the one at the local cigar place?
Oh no!
if you throw elbows,
No, this is playing.
That too. Okay.
if you throw elbows, then you probably ought to be ready to catch one too. So no, but it's fun. It's a bunch of guys doing it. But anyway, all my brothers and all my kids, they were all soccer players. Some of my brothers were professional soccer players. So the idea that I have is it's going to be called a book called The Southside Boys, and it's going to be about St. Louis soccer, and that's going to be 40.
That is a lengthy history.
It's going to be, I've got a lot of research to do, and I'm not a very good researcher, but I mean, I've got these guys, and these guys are just all my brothers and stuff, and these people I play with now, there's 3 or 4 professionals in that. There's English professionals, and it's a function of just, letting them talk, into a...
Yeah, and just remember what they say.
Yeah.
In your books, you bring up, like military, when you came home from Vietnam, you said your parents loved to move and your dad loved to have different cars. Well, you came home from Vietnam in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
and all you knew was a street, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Well, see, the rest of the story is that my mother was mad at me, because she was confused. It was my fault, I suppose. She was confused because...
It's always your fault.
Pardon?
It's always your fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why his wife calls him Jim.
Jim, that's what she calls me.
Anyway, she snaps at him. So.
When she snaps at me. But anyway, she expected me home on the previous Sunday, and I was still in Vietnam the previous Sunday. And she wasn't happy about me going to Vietnam to begin with because she thought that I had been levied to go to Vietnam, and then she saw my orders and found out that I volunteered. She was not pleased. But anyway, we got that's a story that'd take an hour because we left San Francisco at about 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that to come home, and flew from San Francisco to St. Louis. And when we got there and we're going over Banshee Road, you could see the headlights, getting ready to land, and we left because they closed the airport. So we went to Cincinnati. And
That's in Ohio.
In Ohio. Thank you very much. Been there a couple times. So anyway, we were there for a while, and then we flew back because evidently the airport was going to be okay. And we got to Brown Road this time, and you could see the lights of the cars on Brown Road coming in, and zoom, up we went again. Went to Kansas City. Well, we got to Kansas City.
There's a Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri.
It was in Missouri.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So anyway, we got there, and then of course, they closed the Kansas City airport. So me and some lady and some salesman rented a car, drove home.
To be a salesman.
We did.
Sorry.
It's
Me and this.
I think there's a book called The Death of a Salesman.
okay.
This
Yeah.
is factual stuff. I'm just telling you, it's just factual stuff. So we got back to they dropped me off at the airport where I caught a taxi cab. Right. By now it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Remember, we left at 7 in the morning. Now it's 2 o'clock the next day. My mother had written me and said that she lived on Haven Street, but she didn't give me an address because she assumed that Sunday when I was supposed to come home, that they'd meet me at the airport and I wouldn't need an address.
You wouldn't need it.
But at 2 o'clock in the morning, following Saturday or Sunday, I don't remember, I didn't have an address. So the only thing I could do was, this poor cab driver, you got to understand something else too, is when I left for Vietnam, when I left for the Army in 1965, Highway 55 only went as far as Union Boulevard, okay? But when I got back, it went all the way to Highway 70, which meant that the neighborhood where I grew up was all one-way streets or no streets, okay? So this poor cab driver, who is not from South St. Louis, is trying to get me somewhere. And Haven Street it's not the longest street in the city, but it's not a short one either. And so all we could do was drive up and down the street where I'm looking for the last car that my father had, okay? I couldn't find it. But what we did find was we found a car that looked like a car that my father might have. And the cab driver was tired of fooling around with me anyway, so he put me out. And so 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30. I had no option besides knocking on doors. So I knocked on a door, and it was the first one I knocked on, thank the good Lord, I thought, and it was the right one. My sister came to the door, and she called my mother, who was still very upset with me. But anyway, that's how I got home.
So then in all the Sam Niravani murder mysteries, you have a steady supply of characters, but the events all take place in St. Louis, and you talk about all St. Louis streets, landmarks, Tower Grove Park with a series of murders. And so it's a really interesting backdrop when you read these to know the author lived in the area and he wrote the books based upon everything going on in the area. And as your books progressed, you started keeping up with the times, political events, world events. And so you were actually writing some books as things were occurring.
Yeah, that's really kind of weird. There's a story behind that too. I mean, it's in 2000. Got to remember, I'm a nurse, or I was. I retired some time ago.
You're still a professional.
I am still a professional. I know what I'm doing. I used to teach. I got a college degree or two, and I'm not entirely stupid.
We had to triage a member one time who collapsed on the golf course. Jimmy and I were out there, and the member, and we actually have a good cardiac doctor who works here. So it was Jim, me, and the cardiac doctor were helping revive this person. Remember that, Jim?
Yeah, I kept it. But anyway, yeah, I mean, if you read guys like Jonathan Kellerman or Michael Connolly, their books are in the LA area. And it's like what Tony was saying, is that when when you're taking somebody from point A to point B, okay, and it's a book, so it's not a visual thing, all right? You have to, when you say they go down Van Nuys and they go to, Casanega or whatever the rest, that kind of adds some flavor or spice or something like that. Well, I'm from South St. Louis, so I know all those streets. I used to wander those streets, ride my bike, and all the rest of that nonsense. And so doing that, I mean, if a murder happens on, the corner of Minnesota and Iron Avenue, I can describe that in some real detail, okay? And I also know all the people who used to live in those houses and stuff, so I can, and I use a lot of those characters, a lot of the people I knew when I was a kid, as characters in the book, because these are real people. These were part of that place, and it makes a big difference. It does. And then the other thing you were saying, and this makes a lot of sense, and I was just doing it just recently, as a matter of fact, in this last book.
Was it me or Tony that made sense?
Both of you guys. You started to make sense, and he kind of does most of the time. All you guys do. But anyway, the deal of it is I pay attention, not necessarily to the news so much, but I do like to stay informed. I mean, you have to use your BS filter quite a bit. But the point of it is, I was starting to tell you a story about 2000, so I'll get back to that. Sorry. I started writing this book. It's called The Elderly Year, all right? And it's essentially about that virus pandemic thing and stuff like that. I'm loath to use that word, even though COVID is just like a common, it's a kind of virus is what it is. But anyway, I was writing this book, and I'm writing the book in the wintertime of 2000. If you'll remember the wintertime of 2000, everybody was, people were essentially sequestered in their homes or in their basements and stuff. And, you had to keep distance away from people. And anyway, but the point of it is I'm writing this book as fiction. Okay. I really am. I'm writing this book as fiction. And the theory of the story is that this is, anyway, regardless of what the theory of the story was, it was what was happening right then. But the point is that I started writing it in January, just when all this stuff gets started. That's why it's called The Elderly Year. The thesis is that they were trying to kill off old people. And by May, 95% of what I was writing as fiction is in the news. In other words, it's real. And in the ensuing 4 years or so, the last 5%, guess what? It's absolutely real. That is one of those things about when you'll see something or you'll hear something and it just seems to fit. So I put it in there.
Yeah, another book, The Genghis Solution.
Yeah, Genghis Solution. Yeah.
Yeah, in that book, I'm a doctor in Africa.
Yes, you are. Yes, he is.
I have played many a character of which I like in your books because there are people that are characters. And there's a lot of people I know when you talk about like St. Charles Cop Joe Hinkey.
Oh, yeah, Joe, sure.
You talk about other people that you and I both know. Yeah. And they're real life, and they're just various characters. I've been a U.S. Marshal, an ATF agent, a Polish terrorist.
I got you promoted. You were a captain. You got a white shirt.
I rose the ranks in the St. Louis Metro PD.
Yes, you did. Yes,
from an officer to a captain.
I really did. And the reason that Tony winds up in my book so much is it took me 3 years to learn how to spell his name.
And you're very proud of it.
I am. I really am. I practice it all the time.
My name is easy to spell, too.
I know. It really is. I can do yours. I can screw it up, too. But once I learned how to
What do I mean by that?
What?
I could be a good character.
You are. You could be you are. You're in a couple of my books.
I don't think so.
Oh, I believe you are. I believe you are. I would
How
have
about the death of a podcast host or something like that?
death of a
Okay, there
podcast.
we
I can
go.
do that. I mean, no. The thing with this is that you would be amazed because I am from constantly. I just am. I mean, because I'm pretty smart, but I'm really not that smart. I mean,
I appreciate your candor.
well, I mean, it's true. I mean, it really is true. I mean, the thing is that it's not one of these best of days, the worst of days kind of guys. I'm just, I'm not that. But I mean, but the point of it is that ideas come from people say, well, where'd you get that idea? Well, I was in the shower. I mean,
I don't want to know anymore. Okay.
well, no. I was just in the shower one day and I was thinking, and I don't know why I was thinking it, but it was that story I was telling Sarah about earlier about if you knew when you're going to die, would you want to know? And I thought, well, that's a good idea. I think I'll write that down. And I did. It became a book. But it started out that way. And I'll be darned if personal relationships didn't get involved in it. And books tend to do that. And I don't know about anybody else because I don't talk to a lot of writers. I don't have a lot of friends. That's the way it goes. But
Oh, you've got two here.
yeah, I do.
Well, I don't know.
I was
Acquaintances.
that's it's one of those fluid situations, right? You never know.
Did you take all my money last night?
No, I did not. I donated all my money on Tuesday nights, as a matter of fact. But no, I mean, the thing with this is that book ideas, and I've had people say to me, how do you do that dialogue? I said, well, I listen. I listen to people talk. I mean, I do. I steal people's names all the time. As a matter of fact, here's a great story. I had this idea because I have a nephew who's been bugging me for years to write a story about aliens. I don't know anything about aliens. Don't know anything about them. I'm not so sure I even care about them.
Like, Rex? Rex is an alien.
That's exactly
Rex is an
right.
alien.
Yeah, well, if Rex isn't Stretch, certainly is.
Yeah.
But anyway, my wife and I went to North Carolina, to Pinehurst, for our anniversary 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And I'm tooling around with this idea about aliens and about, faster than the speed of light travel and black holes and stuff like that. I'm a very cynical kind of person. I don't believe in all that stuff. But anyway, this young lady comes up and she waits on us, and her name is Journey. Boom. Now, right there. I mean, who names their kid Journey? But I mean, the two main characters of the story are Journey and Destin, which of course is short for destination. And these guys are pure energy alien forces and stuff like that. But I'd always read about alien forces who were green. They had goofy looking heads.
Shaped heads.
Okay, that's Rex for sure.
Absolutely. Or they were here to take us over. We were going to be enslaved and stuff like that. I never read a book about benevolent kinds of aliens. And so that's what I wrote. But there had to be bad aliens in there too, of course.
Well, of course.
There had to be bad. And there were. And so that was kind of fun. But I mean, you just get this stuff. As a matter of fact, part of that story, there's a story about Archimedes, who's a pretty smart dude. And I forget exactly, I think with Phoenicians, I forget who it was. But there was this whole armada of boats that were coming and were going to overwhelm this place where Archimedes and his boys were. So, well, he was. He's a soldier dude. You know what I'm talking
He's a
about.
historical character. The last Indiana Jones movie was written on that too, about that. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of like that because what Archimedes did was he had all of his guys polish, you know the story. They polished their shields, right? And then, it's like doing a thing and melting an ant or whatever. And that's what they did. And they set all these ships on fire because of doing that. I thought, wow, what a great idea. And I'm not the least bit shy about stealing other really good ideas. So I do, as long as you give them credit for it.
Well, and that's the key in your books. Some authors get pigeonholed into a certain genre of lawyers or a fixer who's a defense attorney. You cover everything from murder mysteries to aliens. You did a political book, Pawn Takes Queen.
Yep.
You did COVID, Genghis Solution. You did our buddy tribute to Jimmy G.
0.0, and duty is, I always wanted to write because I'm a big World War II aficionado.
I thought you said Civil War.
Well, that too.
Okay, all right.
It's a war. It's all fair game.
World War I leaves me cold. I don't like that at all. World War II, I've always been fascinated by World War II because, and that leads me into another thing they call this a segue in the business, by the way, is that
It's a big word for the day.
You're talking to the podcast host.
So that's a segue. You know what a segue is, right? So we're going there. So when I was growing up, and this is where the writing comes from, the writing comes from the fact that I used to sit around and listen to my mother tell stories about her childhood, about the Depression, about her brothers in World War II, and all that. Just these really vivid stories and stuff like that. So I became inculcated. That's another really good word. with storytelling bug. And then she beat it in my ears that I got to put the comic books down and actually start reading, which is kind of a fallacy because I think every kid should read comic books because it's great American literature. I'm being serious. I really do believe that. Black Hawk is one of the best comic series you're ever going to read. But anyway, but that's where all that stuff comes from. But if you're going to sum something up, if you're going to say, if somebody said, well, Jim, where does this stuff come from and what should I do to do it? Okay, now I've taken a zillion creative writing courses. I've taught some, as a matter of fact. And there's two things, and you'll hear this in every classroom you're ever in that kind of thing, for that genre, is that writers write what you know. Okay? That's why there's very, very few, and there's some, and they're prodigies, obviously, but you very, very few really young, like toddler type writers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's basically, it's not completely impossible, but it is.
You don't have the life experience.
Absolutely not. And that's what it is that if you write what you know, because for years and years and years and years and years, I was a nurse for 35 years. And I thought, well, I can write books about nursing. And I never did one. Not even
really
one.
Want to.
It's just, I know all kinds of stuff. I'm really kind of smart when it comes to hearts and cancer and stuff. I know a lot of that stuff. But the point of it is I just.
It wasn't fun. Just like your hobbies are fun.
Oh, yeah.
Playing the drums, playing the piano, and learning French.
Learning French. Oh, yeah, back at it, because we're going to France here pretty soon. You were going to say something. Go ahead. You're the boss.
First, you're going to Liverpool, too. I got to take care of Liverpool.
Yes, you do. I'm staying at the It's a Central City Hotel.
It's not a hostel, is it?
Oh, good Lord.
Okay, that's a joke.
Okay, well, that's
okay. A couple of questions. We're going to a couple of questions here. First of all, why have you not written fiction? Nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Well, because you have to be really smart to write nonfiction. You also have to do a ton of research about things. Now, the closest to nonfiction I ever wrote was a Civil War novel. Okay, and that was because I did a lot of research on that, and and it is all of the battles, all of the stories that actually are battles in the book. They actually happened. Now, I fictionalized every one of them, of course, but they actually happened. So it is actually it's fictional history, whatever you call it.
Writing nonfiction, sources, information, you can't be wrong and stuff. It's very hard to write a nonfiction book.
Yeah.
Look, I'm asking Tony, I'll let Tony pick up. What would you say to young people or people who want to be or have aspirations of being an author or writer?
Well, it's like I said a couple seconds ago, is that first of all, you just have to write. That's the hardest part, is that because there are times, especially this last book, murder mystery, I'll knock a murder mystery out in 10 days. Like I said, piece of cake. Boom, 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 boom. I'm so full of crap that I can just, I got a head full of stuff. It causes me
that's called life experience.
Yeah, it causes me no trouble whatsoever to just run words together. And some people are plumbers, some people are detectives, some people, can run a podcast. I couldn't do this. You could hold a gun to my head and I couldn't do it.
You're doing it now?
Well, talking. That's one of the things. That's the same thing. All I do when I write is I go on paper. But anyway, the point is that if you're going to just do it, just write things. First of all, I never throw anything out. I have an entire file of things. They're digital now, but they're called outtakes. Okay, I will have written something.
We're gonna have a few outtakes with us.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. But that's what I would do. Is that I would say just write something. It doesn't matter what you write.
And wouldn't journaling at least get you exposed to putting your thoughts on paper?
Well, sure. It depends on the person. I find journaling boring because I'd be writing about myself, and I would consider that boring. But it could help. Some people really like to do that. They really like to journal on what happened today and stuff like that. Most of the time, the way my day goes or what I do to a day, I like to forget them as soon as I'm done with them. But it is what you have to have, Gary, is that you have to have an idea that you don't need an idea. You just have to be able to sit down and decide, I'm just going to let words come out. That's what my granddaughter does. My granddaughter would sit at my computer and she would write gibberish.
How old is she? 3?
Back then she was 7.
Wow.
And she would write gibberish, but she knew how to spell. And I would say, Cora, why don't you write words? Now this is more fun, Grandpa. And she would do it. And then a couple years later, I'm looking in there and she's written 6 or 7 incredibly coherent pages of a story that she wanted to write. And that's all it is. It's just, pick a topic. I could write a story right this minute. See those trees over there? Okay. See those trees? I could start a story right now.
Oh, that are blowing in the wind?
Yes, blowing in the wind or whatever, and there's something behind them and stuff like that.
There's trees on a wall painting.
And but what I'm saying
to you... They're talking about Sarah.
Yeah, well, no, you could do that about Sarah, too, and so forth. But what I mean is that you look at things just like the character of this last book. I mean, his big deal was stuff. He liked stuff. He liked to look at things. He always wanted to know, why does that thing bend the way that it does? Who thought of that? Why does this work? Why does this go in here like this instead of doing something else? Why is this tree thick? Why is that one thin? It was the kind of kid he was, okay? And that's all writing is. That's all it is.
Well, I'm going to support something you said. I'm going to let Tony ask a couple final questions. Being a police brick as long as I have and the things I've done in my career, people ask me questions. I think it's boring. Hey, what'd you do on this case? What about this murder? What this? I think it's boring. They want to hear it. Well, I don't have an interest, I mean, I don't like talking about it. That's first of all. And second of all is having the interest in the topics. Tony is more of a prolific reader than me. I read as much as I can. I'm very busy with companies I own and teaching at college and taking care of things. Tony, sum it up a little bit with Jim here about what you think about when you first met him. Let's go from the personal aspect. Let's go to golf, and let's talk about the books a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and...
This could really get scary, by the way.
Oh, this is great.
You know what it was is it's like reading Sam Niravani, the murder mysteries. You start in the beginning, and things developed, they unfold, and we never got back to, but with the end of Sam Niravani, you aged him, then you went back and filled in.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where I went with Jim, is started learning about him, his life, and then it was a matter of, as our friendship developed, filling that in, what he did in the war. We have conversations about real life. We never talk about nursing, but it's about life, it's about golf, it's about some of his books. And so it was a development that a lot of his writing goes in different directions. That's why our friendship has gone and the avenues that we have covered. And I think that's something that people ought to look at, is all the different types of books you have written and the different subjects, because it's I always have a book going 365, and I'm always reading before I go to bed to relax. You read a book and it's easy to read. It follows. The St. Louis books follow. You can follow them in your head, where these areas are and what the buildings are like. And I think that's a great way on reading Jim's books, is to get in touch with St. Louis, but then about all the different areas.
My grade school nuns would have called that scatterbrain, by the way, but that's okay.
Well,
I didn't want to go into that topic.
We've been talking here today, talking about a lot of different topics. I know it seems like that we've been all over the place. We really haven't. Think about this. Jim talked about character development, which is mostly on real people that he knows and knew. Jimmy G, a great guy. We played poker with us for years, and Jimmy passed. About events. I'm like Jim. I don't want to write about police work. I have some ideas, maybe something in the future regarding some of the stuff I worked on. It's all about real life events that happen. And we also talked about real life situations, right? What shapes us and the people we are, and putting it on paper. Again, we're with local author Jim Miller. Jim has written 42 books, soon to be 43. And Jim has put a lot of his thoughts into the mystery aspect and true crime. That's a majority of his books, or a good portion. Jim actually went to some of the training through Vista Law Enforcement Training. He attended some of that, watched some of the stuff that officers are trained. He got some good ideas from attending, and I hope Jim will be back for some future training. He got some good ideas. And also our young producers that we have, Jim had a little chance to interact with them, Allie and Sarah, and maybe some interest in, maybe they might read some books. So, Jim, your book's available on Amazon?
Yes, they are. Yeah, if you go to, the problem is that with Amazon is that you have to know the title. I need to say two things. One of the things I say is I don't sell books. I do not. What I do is that if a person is interested in something that I've written, what I ask them to do is to tell me which one they want, and then I will get that book because I get an author's discount. And then I will sign the book to you, but I won't sell it to you. I will ask you to write a check to your favorite charity. Okay? $1 million, I really don't care. And because that's my wife and that's what we do. But I mean, and there was a second part, which I've completely forgotten.
It's about where your books are available.
Oh, yeah. Whether if you know a title like 2.0, if you go to 2.0 and you go to Amazon, and you go 2.0 by Jim Miller, okay? I don't go by James. There's one on there, but I go by Jim. You will find that book, and then there's it's a little convoluted, but then what it'll do is you can get to all of the books that I've written. And then if you get a hold of one of my books, on the first page I've listed all the books that I've written.
So, yeah, go to 2.0, which is your last one.
That's the last.
And you'll see all 41 before that.
That's exactly right. And then all you got to do is get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to sign a book for you.
I would definitely support Jim. Buy a book, especially buy 2.0. That's the latest one. He'll have all of his other ones listed. And again, being the philanthropies that they are, they donate the money to charity, and they ask that you write a check to the favorite charity. And fortunately, we can twist Jim's arm. He gives us books occasionally and stuff. I think Sarah and Allie got 2 books, right? You know, one of them was for me. You know that, right? All right. I won't make you feel any more guilty. But anyways, so
I have the heart to tell you not.
So anyways, hey, I appreciate Jim Miller coming today and Tony Piwowarcyzk. Again, Tony's retired ATF agent. He works for VIS Law Enforcement Training and the Trend Podcast. Jim Miller, local author. Please check out his books. Again, start off with 2.0. We got 4 of his books back here. Jimmy G, 2.0, Duty. And then we have some other ways to look up Jim. If you look up, I think, a Google search. You're in Google, aren't you, Jim, for being an author?
I think so. Not so much. Going to Amazon is the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
It really is. I mean, because I'm not interesting enough for Mr. Google to actually pay me.
Well, and as Jim said, start out with a book title. Then you can work your way back and find books that you like, or the Sam Niraviani Murder Mystery Series is 19 books.
Well, the other thing, too, is it would make it simple now that I'm famous, is that if you could get a hold of the boss here, he knows all that stuff, and the stuff he doesn't know, Tony knows, and they know how to get a hold of me. So it makes it really, really simplifies if you're interested.
We're going to put Jim's information on our website, www.trendmediallc.com. Again, www.trendmediallc.com. We'll put Jim's name. We'll put a few of his books out there. Maybe put a link to whatever we can do to get some interest. Again, read Jim's books. Local St. Louis. If you're from St. Louis, you'll get a kick out of reading the areas where it happens and the character development. Remember, all the characters, or a vast majority, are real people who we all encounter. So thank you so much for listening. Again, stay tuned, stay informed, and we really enjoyed the episode with everybody. So my name's Gary Fortney, and this is The Trend. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode of The Trend. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us at The Trend's website at www.trendmediallc.com, or you can email us at any time at thetrend@trendmediallc.com. We welcome everybody's comments, suggestions, or reviews. Don't forget to stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Trend Media Podcast, and join the conversation on Facebook by searching The Trend Podcast. Check out our Amazon page through the link on our website, where you'll find some of our recommended products. We'll be back next time with more true crime stories, insights on law enforcement trends, and current trends with our region and the people we serve. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay part of The Trend.